So at this stage, it's about peacekeeping. It's about freezing the lines where they are. It's about confidence-building measures between the two sides. Now, those are the thoughts of the White House's national security advisor as US, Russian and Ukrainian delegations are assembled in the same facility in Riyadh. Already the US has met with Ukrainian officials last night, in fact, those officials afterwards calling those talks productive. And now the US is talking to the Russian delegation to try to find ways forward towards peace.
I feel that he wants peace. The president had two very productive calls this week, or last week, I should say, one with President Zelensky, one with President Putin. I sat and listened to both of them. In both conversations, it was all about a lasting peace.
Kethevane Gorjestani, our international affairs editor, is with me here on set. Kethevane, the talks well underway last night and again today. What can we expect?
Well, look, the U.S. is sounding pretty optimistic, so optimistic that there are several U.S. media reports that say that the White House is aiming for a possible broader ceasefire to be agreed on by April 20th. We'll see if that actually happens. But yes, very optimistic. Steve Witkoff saying that even though he's not at the negotiations themselves, he said that he was expecting real progress to be made in these talks. The main focus of these talks is expected to be, one, the details of how to implement the current ceasefire, which is focused on the energy infrastructure, what really constitutes an energy infrastructure, how do you monitor it, these types of sort of concrete elements. Also, the idea of expanding the current ceasefire to the Black Sea, probably resuming the Black Sea initiative. But there again, the Russians are already saying that they don't want something like what we had back in 2022, that they want more guarantees. And you mentioned the confidence-building measures, possibly something like the question and what happens to those Ukrainian children that are currently being held by the Russian who could be released. The Kremlin, however, is sounding a much less optimistic tone. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, talking about difficult negotiations ahead and saying that they are just at the beginning of the path, really insisting on the fact that this is going to take some time. But as we heard, Steve Witkoff, he says that the main point that makes them so optimistic is that they believe that Vladimir Putin does want peace.
Any signs Russia might budge? Because that's what's needed, isn't it?
Well, right now, not really. What it looks like is that the strategy of the Russians is not to give in one go, the way the Ukrainians did, because they were asked by the Americans to take and agree to an immediate and complete ceasefire for 30 days. What the Russians are doing is sort of playing the clock, negotiating step by step, because that is going to take more time. And why do they want more time? Because they're the ones who have the momentum on the ground. They're the ones who are gaining, yes, inch by inch, but they are the ones that are pressing forward in eastern Ukraine. They know that the longer these negotiations take, the longer it takes to get an actual ceasefire, the more they might be gaining ground in eastern Ukraine. And this is, of course, even more important for the Russian if at some point there's an actual peace negotiation. So the strategy is very clear. And the only way that could change would be by having the United States actually exert pressure on the Russian the way they did with the Ukrainians. Remember what the U.S. did, what Donald Trump did. He told the Ukrainians, if you don't agree to the ceasefire, he paused the military aid, he paused the sharing of intelligence, and he only released it once the Ukrainians had agree. Right now, Washington doesn't seem to be willing to do the same thing with the Russian, or they're maybe unable, but this is really seen by the Americans, and they said that the test would be to see who really wants peace. Right now, they're not getting the answers they want from the Russians, but they're not showing right now that they're willing to put more pressure.
So the obvious question, I suppose, is why is the US not putting any more pressure on?
Well, look, one aspect could be that there's limited leverage for the United States. Of course, we've talked about sanctions in the past, but we've seen that even with crippling sanctions, the Russian state is continuing and that it's not really impeding their advances on the battlefield. The other issue is also this proximity, this affinity between the new Trump administration and Vladimir Putin and his entourage. We've seen this affinity between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin himself, and we're seeing it also with Steve Witkoff. He spoke to Fox News, but he also spoke to Tucker Carlson, who's also very close to the Kremlin. And some of the words that he used really showed where Steve Witkoff, the main negotiator for the United States on this topic, stands. He said, I don't regard Vladimir Putin as a bad guy. I like him. He's super smart. He talked about his personal meeting with Vladimir Putin earlier this year in Moscow, talking about how Vladimir Putin had told him about this painting of Donald Trump that he had commissioned. Witkoff saying it was a beautiful portrait of Donald Trump. He talked about how Vladimir Putin told him that he went to pray in church for Donald Trump when he had been shot during the campaign. Witkoff also seemingly repeating some of the narrative coming out of the Kremlin on why they got in and invaded Ukraine in the first place. He said that there were two sides to the story, that yes, those eastern regions, well, you know, they are Russian speaking after all. They are close to Russia after all. He even said that the Russians reclaimed these regions, reclaim meaning in his mind that they belong to the Russians initially. So that gives you an idea of the ideological position of Steve Witkoff. Witkoff insisting that Vladimir Putin doesn't want more than eastern Ukraine, and also that he doesn't want more in the rest of Europe. This is something that goes a little bit counter to what we've heard the Russian president say for years now, which is his idea of reclaiming not only Ukraine, but the sphere of influence of the greater Russia, especially in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. So right now you're seeing the main negotiator very, very chummy with Vladimir Putin. So it seems that for now, the White House is trying to play good cop, it seems, with the Russian, giving the Russians the benefit of the doubt. How long that lasts, that goodwill from the United States, we'll have to see.